Okay, everyone, welcome aboard. Thanks so much for coming along on this Wednesday afternoon to our August webinar, Making Contact. So it's a little bit about how we can learn some lessons, I guess, from outside the school zone around effective communication and what today's parents, or to be honest, what today's contemporary people are looking for in terms of communication. I would argue pretty strongly that it's probably the one area that schools have moved the least over the last 30 years or so, is in changing the way that we communicate, thus that we can do it more effectively, because certainly people and the way that they interact has changed an enormous amount over the last 30 years. So we want to learn what some of the new ways that actually work in a contemporary community are, and to bring them to life in our work, which is critically important. I want to thank you all again for coming along. I'm excited to look at the attendee list today and to see both some familiar and some new faces. And it tells me that we might have touched on an important topic here, and all the literature tells us that this is a critically important and also a stressful topic for schools to deal with. It's stressful in that, I guess, one of the things that's interesting is there's quite a few studies out there about teacher stress, and there's even a few around school leader stress, but there's very little that brings them both together. And when we do look at the combination of those two strategies, those two cohorts, sorry, teachers and school leaders, it comes in at number 2 as the most significant stressor is relationships with parents. It's just below student behaviour, and it's just above workload. So that's probably a familiar tune to all of you. And there's a big gap after that to anywhere else, to any of the other topics that might cause us stress, might reduce our capability to do our very best stuff. So it's critically important that we address what's high on those lists and to actually do something that reduces our stress. And if we can do that by doing something that's more effective at the same time, then so be it. If the volume today that's coming through to you is a little bit affected, or even sounds a little bit different to the volume previously that you might be used to on our webinars, then it might be due to the fact that I'm coming to you today from sunny, albeit slightly chilly Canberra. We're doing some exciting work around learning cultural defence here in Canberra, and so this afternoon I'm not coming from the comfort of my Mornington Peninsula office today, but I'm coming from Canberra. So if you do hear a little bit of activity in the background or something like that, you'll know what that's all about. It's also pertinent for us today to be doing a webinar about parents, just because our wonderful business manager, Chris, who many of you know, and despite my insistence that Chris doesn't need to be here today, she is. Chris also became a parent for the second time just last week, so we had the excitement at growing the Rural Schools team by one, and we welcome Addie aboard to the team, and we know that she's at the moment, one thing she's getting right is that she's doing some good sleeping. So well done, Addie, and congratulations to Chris. Okay, let's get cracking. When we are talking about the big problem, the dilemma that we face when it comes to dealing with parents, what we are talking about is quite a fundamental and quite to be honest, a universal disconnect. And this is something that's telling us that what has happened is the relationship has changed between home and school, such that it can be categorised not so much by a partnership anymore, but quite often it's categorised by an adversarial relationship. And we want to do something about that. And when we look at that dilemma, there's actually a horrible yet, I guess, strangely beautiful irony about it, in that the purpose for which both of us are really, purpose for us as being educators, but also the purpose behind which most parents send their kids to school hasn't changed a great deal over a period of 30 years, but the relationship has. So we go, what's that all about? And what we're finding is that parents and schools, where we are having arguments, where we are having conflict, we're arguing over the peripherals and not what those key purposeful messages are. So it's about how we can get back into a trusting partnership that's built around those core purposes those core reasons that we actually are involved in working with young people. And I guess when we find ourselves in a dilemma like this, and we feel a little bit like we've been roped to the train tracks, and we need someone to jump in and save us. Well, the first thing I want to highlight is that we're about to be saved. And the reason for that is that when it comes to who or what is behind the deterioration in the partnership between home and school, the good news, if there is good news in it, is that there certainly can't be any blame laid at the feet of schools. While I think there's things that we can do better, we certainly haven't crossed any threshold where we need to take some blame for that. And the funny thing is that we certainly also shouldn't be attributing blame towards our parents either. They're not to blame for this either. One of the things that's happened in a very insidious and very long-term kind of way is the media has been the one that's been chiefly behind the deterioration in this partnership. And what we need to understand is that there is very little good news to be had in local school works beautifully with parent community. We just don't see that as a headline. We just don't see that as a featured story on Today Tonight, and we don't see it on a current affair either. And that's a problem for us, because there are really good examples out there of parents and schools working together. There are strategies that are working, that are bringing schools and parent communities closer together, but they don't make the mainstream media. All that makes the mainstream media are topics firstly around what we call the Big Five. Now, most of us, if you're an educator and you're here today with your educator hat on, most of us will be blissfully unaware of the Big Five. The Big Five in the media are the 5 topics in education that they would like to produce stories around. Now, firstly, before I tell you what the Big Five are, it's critically important to understand why the Big Five exist. And they exist because these are the 5 topics that parents and schools are most in conflict around. You see, while we won't get that headline about us working beautifully together, we certainly can craft a headline about conflict between parents and schools. And the media have worked out 5 topics under which we generate the most conflict. So let's get clear about what they are, those Big Five. First of all, we're talking about behaviour. And that can be behaviour that is between student to student. For instance, they're interested in bullying. It can be in terms of behaviour between teachers and students, and it can be in terms of conflict between teachers and parents. All we need is an element of somebody behaving badly, and there's a news story in it. So while you may not be able to get much recognition for a wonderful across-the-board rise in NAPLAN results with a certain cohort, if you can find one student who performs poorly in an area and they didn't get access to a particular program, and a parent who can jump up and down about it, and a teacher who perhaps didn't handle it well, hey, we've got a news story there. So we need to understand that, I guess, the big subset of that behaviour is that we're interested only in bad behaviour. So we want to be mindful about those stories getting out there. We also want to be careful about that performance data that I mentioned before. Anytime we can prove both at a system and at a school level that we might be slipping behind. So again, the big subset of that performance data title in the Big Five is that it's only bad performance data that they're particularly interested in. And the other 3 are things that we honestly have very, very little awareness of, because they're that far from our core business. But they're interested in nutrition. They're interested in if you're going to facilitate your kids taking a couple of cans of Red Bull on a camp, that's for sure. They're interested in uniform, and they're interested in homework. And so they're the big areas that we will find the media talking to us about, and they're the areas that over a succession of about 30 years of our tabloid-style media that our parents have had so many messages about schools not performing in those, to be totally honest, non-important areas, that they've started to not trust us. So when we ask ourselves who will save us at this point from the train that's coming down the track in terms of our parent community, the truth is that the media are not about to save us. How do we get saved? Well, as is always the case with the damsel in distress, she needs to pull a nail file out of her little handbag there, and we have to save ourselves. We have to find a way to start doing the little things that untie those ropes and that get us off the tracks. And so it is up to us, one school at a time, to make a difference. So today's webinar is really about what's the big lens through which you will need to view parent communication, because we need to view it differently than we were 30 years ago if we're going to address this problem. And only then can we start to talk about some of the strategies that you might find effectively with those new goggles for viewing parent community on. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. A couple of little things to maximise your engagement today. First is to remember that this is your game. I started thinking 30 years ago, I love this picture of the old style arcade game here, and I want you to remember that you're the one with your hand on the joystick today. So we're going to do whatever we can to keep a really good eye on our attendees, and know that there are two ways that you can get involved. Number one is that you can put your hand up. If you look at your control panel, you'll be able to see that there's a little tab there that allows you to put your hand up. Now, just like you're in class, if you put your hand up today, I'm going to make the assumption that you have something to say. And in those circumstances, what I will do is unmute you, and you'll have the opportunity to speak directly, verbally, to the webinar. Looking at some of the names of the people who are in the room today, I know that there are people in this room today who would have something to offer in that space. So whether it's something that you'd like to offer, or whether it's something that you would like to ask, know that that facility is available to you. I want you to also know that we have a question box. And if you go to that question box and pop your question in, I'm a little bit like a frog in a pot. The water will just continue to rise in temperature until I'm in all sorts of trouble, and there'll be lots of questions there that I haven't yet attended to along the way. But Chris is awesome at stopping me and making sure that I'm aware that people are asking questions about a particular area. So if you've got questions about the content today or comments you want to make, please, by all means, use that facility, and I'm going to try to remember to make sure that I pay attention to it. And then also, I guess, even if you're having some technical difficulties today, Chris is terrific in the background at being able to help people who might be having some audio challenges or just some challenges accessing the webinar today. So know that that's available, and let's make this a highly interactive experience so that we actually get some answers for your unique contexts moving forward. So speaking about your unique contexts, let's find out a little bit about you. I'm going to launch two polls. The first one for me is always my poll that allows me to find out how you're seeing things, which means I need to know who you are. So I'm launching a poll now that's going to ask you which seat you're sitting in, how you're viewing the situation. So just have a little think there about which role you're coming from. Is it a principal or a system leader role? Are you coming from an AP type position where you're trying to influence up and down, aim also with that senior or leading teacher position? Are you here in a teaching role, or are you here as somebody who's trying to learn about this because you're an aspiring leader? So I like to make sure that we get a good cross-representation on this, and for me to find out where we're at, which means I like to get around 80%. Leanne, if you're here from a business manager perspective, I think that what we'd like you to have in there is at least in one of those top three, I guess. Pick a leadership role, because it's certainly where I positioned my business manager previously. So thank you for asking that question. Pick one of those. We've gone past 80% now, so that means most of you are nice and used to being involved in this. I'm going to close that poll and share those results with you so that you can see that we have quite a decent cohort today of people who come from the teaching perspective, trying to understand how they can connect with their particular parents more effectively. And we've got a really lovely, I guess, smattering across the leadership area there as well. So that's something that I definitely need to keep in mind as we move forward. Okay, returning to our PowerPoint there, what I also need to do is to find out a little bit today about what you're looking for. So my second poll that I want to launch today is about what are you here to hunt and gather? What are you here to find out about most chiefly? Because I want to dwell a little bit on the areas that are most important to you. So we came up with 5 that we think fit neatly within the reasons that most people would attend a webinar like this. The first one is to find out new ways and means to communicate. What are the best ones to use? The second one is to find out what parents really want to hear about. So it's not just about how we communicate and whether we're using TickBiz or a different app, but it's about what do we really need to say to get their attention. That connects, I guess, with the bottom point, which is about what are the best ways to get your parents' attention and involvement. And we've got those 2 others in there as one, how we deal with parent complaints, particularly those ones that become a bit aggressive and very difficult to deal with. I know myself that one of the things that as I walked through school leadership, that one of the real challenges was always the phone calls or the communiques that you were putting off was always causing me stress. And then how to improve long-term relationships with our parents is something that you might have decided to come here for today. So I want to give you just a tiny bit more time to get that poll up to where it lurked past. Oh, we're up to about 70% now. So give it a little bit of thought for those who haven't let us know yet what it is that you're really looking for today. It's been fascinating for me there is watching some of those statistics, those graphs go up and down as you have voted. So let me close that and again share the results with you. So what we've got here, I guess, is what a lot of people wanting to know how to get parental attention, and that makes sense because, to be honest, I'm a parent myself. I come today with multiple hats. I'm a teacher, I'm a school leader, I'm a consultant to schools, but I'm also a parent, and I know that my schools, my children's newsletter, as an example, arrives by email, which is a good way to do it. Do it electronically, save a few trees. Doesn't mean I'm engaging with it. And even as someone with a keen interest in education, I rarely do much more than either forward it to my beautiful wife, or sometimes I even just delete it outright, which isn't good enough. But the truth is, on the other end of that partnership, there's not being enough done to get my attention. So I'm going to keep that in mind, and then we've got that specific one about parent complaints. One of our 5 strategies today is directly about how to handle that. So I want to be able to help you with that one as we move forward. Hide those results. Get back into our PowerPoint. Scott, what have we got to say? We liked all of the options and found it hard to pick just one. That makes sense, Scott. Just there for a bit of a guide today. I'm hoping that I can hit more than one of you, that's for sure. Okay, it is indeed a complex challenge connecting with parents in this way. All right, let's get cracking. So the first thing I want to do is to give you a new lens through which to do things. I did have a friend pick on me recently about my little slight obsession with Venn diagrams to unpack things. I must be a very visual learner. This is something, and so my friend with who likes to go at me about that sent me this Venn diagram to summarise, my obsession, I guess, with Venn diagrams. So I just thought I'd share that as a bit of a joke. But the Venn diagram that I really want to show you is this one. Because what we're trying to do here is to light a fire. And when you are talking about lighting a fire, there are 3 elements involved. So we need some oxygen, we need heat, and we need fuel to be able to make that fire happen. And the unique nature of those 3 things coming together when it comes to fire is that you can talk about each of those critically important elements individually, and that's great. You can break them down and understand all of the little components within those as much as you possibly like. But the truth is, when it comes to fire, we can't talk about fire by eliminating one of these. So what happens is that we need to be very clear that we are only going to get fire when we pay attention to these 3 key components and have them in place. In fact, when we have one missing, we don't get a fire, we get something that's rather unproductive and unhelpful. So I want to show you a little bit about what that means, because first of all, when we're talking about message, and this is the oxygen for it, is I want to encourage you to start to think more about the messages that you're sending out. I saw a school newsletter the other day that at the very front page of the newsletter, and at the very first piece of information that was outlaid to staff, to the parent community, was a simple reminder about library books being returned on time. Now, that might be some information you'd like your parents to get, but to be honest, it's boring. And it doesn't give people the information, it doesn't give people the idea that we have something particularly important to say. So thinking about message is about saying that we are going to say important things only. And when it comes to our big communicative devices, for instance, our traditional ones like our newsletter or our assemblies, we need to talk about what's important in schools and not what's operational. The second thing we need, I guess the thing that gives it a bit of heat these days, is to make sure that we are communicating along multiple channels, which means not falling for the trap of only speaking through our newsletter or only speaking through our assemblies just because they're the things that we've already done. One of the things that we have now is the availability of many, many more channels to be able to reach our parents with, and we want to be able to use them effectively. And the last one is the fuel for all of this, I guess, is that if we don't throw a few logs on the fire occasionally, the thing goes out, which means what we need to do is to constantly add fuel to the fire by making sure that there is a strong enough volume of message going out there, that there are lots of messages getting out there, so that people are able to consume regularly the things that we say that we believe are important. Now, if in this space we don't eliminate if in this space we eliminate one of the elements of our fire, for instance, if we're on message, so we're saying important things and we're saying them regularly, but we're always saying them through the same channels and we're not using an expansive network of channels, then the truth is our message becomes uninteresting. We're receiving the message the same way every single time, and it doesn't engage us, and it doesn't get us to the point where we're actually engaging with that message anymore. In some ways, we're wasting a lot of our time when this happens. Now, when we head over to the other side, and for instance, we're on message, and we're using lots of different apps and lots of different ways of communicating, but the truth is we just do it every now and then when we remember, then what happens is that we have this unconvincing nature to our message. And what I mean by that is that because we only occasionally post something on our school's Facebook page, it gives the impression to the community that the reason that we used the Facebook page was not that we had something important to say, but simply that we realised that we hadn't used the Facebook page for a while, so someone was tasked with putting a photo or a little bit of text in there. It's unconvincing. When I read posts like that from, I follow the Facebook pages of many schools. When I see those posts that just, I haven't seen anything from that school for ages, I go, somebody must have reminded an admin officer that they need to post something. Not that I thought they had something interesting to say, but just that something bobbed. I thought, we better put something up there or people will forget it exists. And when we go down to the bottom of this graph and we start to say, okay, we've got lots of message going out and we're using different channels, but to be honest, all of it's particularly boring message, then we make ourselves viewed as untrustworthy people. When we communicate heavily about absolutely nothing, we give the impression that we have something to hide. And that's not what we want. In fact, what we spoke about previously in restoring the relationship between home and school was that we said we are trying to build a relationship that is founded on trust. So to do that, we are going to have to make sure that our message is very strong and that we are communicating about very important things. So this is our lens, and when we're talking about, I guess, in any of the strategies, I'm going to give you 5 different strategies that I want you to think about deploying in your school. But if you aren't viewing those strategies through the lens of message, volume, and different channels, then I actually think that those strategies themselves are going to fail, and you're not going to get the fire that you're looking for lit under your parent community. Okay, so let's get cracking. Number 1 is that I want you to actually start to communicate a little more like Bon Jovi. Now, what am I talking about there? There are people here who will know what I mean by communicating like Bon Jovi, because what Bon Jovi do incredibly well is that they manipulate the media and the channels that they have available to them to slowly get you to demonstrate the behaviour that they're looking for from you. So for Bon Jovi, who are one of the world's most well-known and profitable stadium bands, what the behaviour is that they're looking for is that they're looking for you to buy a ticket. So what they do first of all is they manipulate the rule of 6. The rule of 6 is the rule that the radio stations use, which is to play a song on incredibly high rotation, and this is the reason that when you do hear a new song on the radio, that it seems like they're playing it every second song. So they put that song into high rotation, because what they need is for you to recognise that song and to tap along on the steering wheel as you're driving along and go, oh, righto, I know this song, very quickly. Because if you do that, you'll stay longer on the station, you'll even stay and listen to the ads on that station, and that means that the radio station gets paid. So Bon Jovi know that what they need to do occasionally is use some of their old songs, and they will even pay radio stations to put their old songs into high rotation, because they need to bring our attention back to the idea that, oh, I know this song, I remember this song, we love this song. And even though there's possibly, some people would argue with me, I suppose, there's only so many times that you can hear them on a prayer. Some people might argue that that's infinite. The truth is what they want us to do is to recognise that Bon Jovi is still around. And at this point, what they'll do is once they get their songs back into high rotation, is that they will start to, they'll announce that they've got a tour coming up. Because it gives the first group of people who are the die-hard Bon Jovi fans who just love those new songs, those old songs coming back on the radio, it gives them a chance to buy the very tickets, the very most expensive ones, the ones in the front row, the ones that they know diehards will pay $500 a ticket for, and that's all fantastic. And at least maybe 5 to 10% of the people who are going to come to a Bon Jovi concert have been scooped up at that point. But that doesn't fill a stadium. So what they do after that is they say, okay, let's use the media, let's use these communicative channels a little differently. And then they start to give some interviews on the radio stations around the world, about 3 to 4 months ahead of actually appearing in concert. And another 10% of people will go and buy tickets. They'll then release a new song, and they'll make sure that that gets onto high rotation. People go, oh, okay, they're not just going to play the old stuff, and another 10% buy tickets. Then they'll release the video, and they'll put that on YouTube, and they'll saturate it through their social media. Every step they're taking here, another 10% of people are buying tickets. They'll only, towards as we get close to the concert start, to put direct ads on television in the last few weeks and on radio stations and newspapers. And finally what they do is they make sure that there's plenty of posters around railway stations and things like that, so that the people who haven't actually caught on that there's a Bon Jovi concert coming up finally get that message while they're walking home from work, and the last 10% of tickets get sold to a Bon Jovi concert. And what do you know, we've all spent a whole lot of money putting 70,000 people in front of Bon Jovi. It's very, very clever use of that theory around using multiple channels to communicate effectively. And if we want to actually communicate really well with our community, with our parents, then we're going to need to learn how to just market ourselves a little bit more like Bon Jovi to get people as they come on. You see, in schools, we have a big habit of going for one magic bullet. So we try to find one thing that will get parents to involved. And so, for instance, we might run a parent night, and then when we only get 10% of them, we're shattered. Because then how could 90% of people not bother to come? Well, the truth is we just need to build some other mechanisms that allow them to get involved in different ways, and we'll get them 10% at a time, just the way that Bon Jovi do as well. The second thing that I want you to do, this slide pains me, and it pains me to build it, is to be more like Andrew Bolt. And for those of you who don't know Andrew Bolt, he's the columnist for the Herald Sun in Melbourne, and he has a very conservative and right-wing view that kind of rubs the wrong way with me. So first of all, when I put this slide up here, I need to first of all just say sorry. I'm sorry that I'm advising you to be a lot more like Andrew Bolt in your communication. But the truth is, what Andrew Bolt does, and I almost agree with nothing that he writes in the newspaper, but what he does is he gets people to read it. And how does he do it? He writes opinion pieces. And this is what I want you to think about from a school leadership perspective, about your newsletters that are going out, from the teachers that are in the room today. I want you to think about your term letters and things like that are going out to your community. And I want you to write about the things that you believe incredibly strongly in and the things that you know to be true. Now, Bolt takes that a step further that might be a little dangerous for us, in that he communicates about with a high level of expertise about things that he doesn't necessarily or isn't necessarily capable of proving it true, which I think is a bridge too far. But what he does is he will never have a blog or an article that says Andrew Bolt's latest opinion, in much the same way that we might start a newsletter with Principal's Report. He will have a snappy and eye-catching headline that will either excite us or it will make us incredibly cross. Either way, people click and see what it is that he's got to say. So 3 things there. Number 1, make a stand. Use your communicative tools, particularly in newspaper, your newsletter and your assemblies, to make a stand about the things that you believe to be very true about your school and about what a good school should look like. Number 2 is to declare your expertise. Stand strongly in the things that you know are true and allow people to come criticise. We don't have to pander to people who don't know what really makes a great school. We need to help them learn what it is. And we need to be the people who take an authoritative position in regards to that. And the one thing that Andrew Bolt does so well that we need to be prepared to do occasionally is to pick a fight. So what Andrew Bolt does is there's 2 ways that he picks a fight. First of all, he picks a fight with people. So sometimes we may need to get up there and say things that we know will get a negative reaction at first from the people that we are speaking to. And the other thing that we do sometimes as a school leaders that's valuable to do equally often is to actually stand up and pick a fight on behalf of the people in our community, which means that while there might be some accountabilities coming down the pipe from either government or system, occasionally as school leaders we need to say, you know what, that actually isn't why our parents send our kids to school, so we're going to say no, and we're going to say it on your behalf, and we're going to say it loudly and proudly and let you know that we are on your side. So make a stand, declare your expertise, and just occasionally pick a fight. And this is why, despite me disagreeing with Andrew Bolt's opinion on just about everything, I still find myself reading his articles. All right, the next thing that I really want you to do is to start to speak to the neo-cortex. Now, this goes to this notion of why so many people today, I think we had 26% of people when we did our poll before, said that they want help with how to deal effectively with parent complaints. Now, parent complaints, when it comes to that, and parent complaints particularly as they get aggressive, but some of the literature tells us that the rate of what they're complaining about, first of all, is that about 82% of them have something to do with conduct or relationships. It's about the way people are treating each other is the main reason that parents come along. Of course, there is sometimes coming to complain about the reality of the way people are treating each other, and very often they are also coming along to complain about their perception of the way that people are treating each other in the school. So just first of all, be aware that that's what they're coming to talk to us about. Now, in that instance, there are 5 steps that I want you to take that I think will allow you to speak to the neocortex of this person's brain. The neocortex is the thinking, the rational centre of our brain. Unfortunately, when they arrive and they come to speak to you and they bang down your door or thump their fist on your desk, the neocortex of their brain has not been engaged, it's been parked. And the active part of their brain is the limbic system, and the limbic system is our emotional centre. So our first job is to try to get them to a point where they will start to use the part of their brain that thinks. Now, at this point, for instance, step 1 that I want you to do here is to let them have their rant. Now, the reason for that is that if we try to argue with any of the issues that we have that they're bringing up at this time, we are arguing with things that are irrational, that do not make sense, and we will find ourselves in an argument that can't be won, because how can you argue with or against things that don't make any sense and that the person saying it really doesn't believe with the neocortex anyway? So we have to first of all let them have their rant, let them go, let them finish. In the Australian vernacular we would say let them get it off their chest, okay? We don't have to believe it, we don't have to take it on as fact, okay, but let them say it anyway. I often even like to, sometimes while that person is ranting, to write down the things they're saying. And we'll come back to that list a little bit later. Number 2, the second thing you want to do is to make sure that you don't respond immediately. While they're ranting, the limbic system is on, neocortex is off. All we are doing at the moment is surviving long enough to let the thinking part of their brain come back on. So don't respond to the content of what they're saying immediately. And look, we can understand this because we've all been in arguments ourselves when we've been feeling heated. I don't know about how many of you, for instance, have had that call. I don't know if you've ever had the call from your child's school to let you know that they've done something wrong. The pull to say something quite ridiculous is incredibly strong. We feel like we need to defend ourselves or the raising of our child, or we need to defend the child in some way, or maybe we even overreact and we're ready to kill my kid and all that. So we think and say some really strange things when we're in an emotional place, so we don't have to listen to it, okay? We don't have to respond to that, we just need to let them get it off their chest. Number 3 is that once they have had their rant and you've checked in to make sure that yes, you've said what you needed to say, I've gotcha. Number 3 is to make sure that you deal with the reason you contacted them. The worst thing you can do in any difficult conversation is to have a difficult conversation that didn't get you to the part for the very reason that you actually found the bravery to pick up the phone or to invite a person into your office. So make sure that once they've had that, yeah, we've got that, yes, okay, is there anything else you want to tell me? Okay, no problem. Look, the reason that I rang you today was just because this happened at recess. Our teacher dealt with it this way. I've had a chat with the people affected. I think that they're all under control now, and I thought you deserve to know. Are we sweet about that instance alone? And at this point, you can return, number 4 is you can return the rant. And you can actually start to say, okay, you said a lot of things before. For instance, there are maybe 28 different complaints about you and your school. At this point, let's return to that after we've dealt with the reason for the call. And so what would you like me to do about these things? The truth is that in my experience, it's about 90% of parents who will say something at that point along the lines of, oh, don't worry about it, I just thought you should know. And what that's about is that, you know, at this point, the conversation has all of a sudden become far safer, and the neocortex, the thinking part of their brain, has come back on. And when the thinking part of their brain sees the things that they said when they were emotional, they often want to walk away from it. They want to get out of that situation. The last last thing that I want you to do here after you've returned to the rant, that's number 4. The number 5 thing that I want you to do here is to forgive them. Is to honestly and in your head and in your heart actually say, you know what, I can understand that if I got that sort of message, particularly if I got that sort of message about my child's conduct at school, that I would actually feel awful about it. And when I'm feeling awful, sometimes I do and say the wrong thing to people who I'd like to be in partnership with. And when that happens, and when you recognise that that happens, instead of going to the staff meeting and to the staff room and demonising that parent, or instead of even internalising the fact that maybe I'm going to think of this parent as being a complete drongo from now on, we actually need to stop and go, you know what, I forgive them. It's okay. It's okay. Their parents do some, as parents, we do some really strange things when we're under pressure, and as a result of the amazingly strong emotional connection that we have to our kids. I'm going to pause here for a moment because I'm seeing that I've got at least one hand up. So I've got Gosdi. Gosdi, I'm just going to give you just a moment here to see whether that hand's gone up by accident and you're just stretching. If you'd like to put your hand down, you can. I had a funny feeling that might have been the case. And I'm just also going to return to our question box and just make sure I'm up to date there. Leanne's asking a little bit about what about the keyboard warriors that are not face-to-face. I am very big, I guess, when it comes to conflict on the whole idea of one of the things that we can do by virtue of the fact that the relationship exists because we are the school is that we pick the arena for battle. So where we get an incredibly long email, I make sure that I reply with an email that says, we should talk about this, give me a call tomorrow. Or we should talk about this, what time should I call you tomorrow? I know some parents, some teachers who've been so clever about this, to the point of maybe just sending a text message or even a direct message on Twitter. I know one parent does. It's just said, mainly because the Twitter thing is reduced to 140 characters. And it just says, hey, give me a call this afternoon when you've got a moment. It gives everyone a chance to just prepare themselves, to just take that limp system out of it, to just drop the heat out of it, and we'll communicate in the arena that we think gives us the best chance of solving the problem. So I don't like to respond to big long emails with big long emails because I think I'm encouraging the next email to be even longer and to also sound like it's being vetted by 7 lawyers. So I don't like to go down the path of allowing our parents to choose the arena. We do that, Leanne, and we make a choice about that because we're going to set ourselves up for success, not victory, which is an important distinction to make also in that regard. Thank you for your question, Leanne. That's fantastic. The next thing I want you to do in terms of communicating with parents is to be where they are. They're not where we thought they were. That has changed. Our parents, one of the highest saturations or penetrations of social media is among parents, particularly mums, of 1 or 2 children. So they are among the highest users and the highest registers of using sites like Facebook. So where we might be nervous because there might be that one parent who likes to go off on a Facebook rant about the school because then I don't have to come down and confront the school about it, but I can find lots of allies through social media. While that might be a scary thing to do, to not be in that arena with our parents is a foolish thing to do. All we need to do is to construct to make sure that we use that arena effectively to our advantage. So there are a few things involved in that. Number one is that you set up the protocols for your school's Facebook page in the section it's about the page descriptor, which means that we let people know that this is a place where we're sharing the achievements and we're sharing the positives around our great school community, and we directly tell them if you have any issue with the school, we ask you not to use this page but to come directly to the school so that we can directly deal with your problem. And all you do in those circumstances, if someone breaks the protocol, which is what we're developing there for your page, is we block their tweet, we block their post, and if they, for the second time, decide that they're going to post something negative on there, we simply remove them from the page. And that becomes a problem, and a problem that you deal with by coming down to the school, as we pointed out in the first place. So I want you to be really clear about that. Set the protocols up for your page in the page descriptor there. The next thing that I want you to do is to start to communicate about a many number of different things through your school's Facebook page. So let me give you a list of things that you might like to include in there. Number one is you could share your school's calendar. Number two is to share whole school achievements. When you get a good bit of data, or you get a class that wins an award, or a group that goes away and does something fantastic on a school camp, make sure that you share that achievement on the Facebook page. Photo of the week or something like that, even if it's not of students, but if it's of facilities and things that are going on there, is a great way to make sure that people are reminded about the positive environment that you're building at the school. Having features about new and retiring staff is something that's really fantastic to put on the Facebook page. Having a post every now and then about student or staff achievements. It's just so fantastic when you've got a student who goes and does something terrific or achieves at a really high level, and then occasionally if you've got a staff member that completed Tough Mudder on the weekend, make sure you put a post up about that and make sure that people are aware of the positive people that are in your community. It's one of those interesting things. Once we see and hear things positive about parents, what we tend to find is that we start to believe positive things about them, and it's far more difficult to have a negative or power-based interaction with that person afterwards. Include video Q&As where we can get to know people. Include teachers who might be doing a little weekly summary of this is what we learned about in our class this week, or this was a key piece of achievement that happened in our class this week. Scratching up some of your alumni for your school is a great thing to put on your Facebook page, particularly while we do this webinar today. We've got the Olympics on, so I would imagine in our team of hundreds of athletes over there that they came from hundreds of schools. So I'd imagine that there is plenty of schools, even people who are listening today, who's if there's an athlete over there at the Olympics went to perhaps your school, and let's highlight them. Let's make them famous that way as well. Now, in terms of posting and what you should do when that comes up, how often you should post, about 3 to 4 times a week is what we're suggesting for our for successful Facebook pages, and just rotating through all of those different themes at different times. And to be honest, the best way to post through there is to make sure that you use a social media post scheduler. So the one that we use at Real Schools is Buffer, so you can head to buffer.com, and I think it's for about $15 a month. You'll be able to assign, for instance, an admin officer to collecting all of those different things, and they simply pop them all in and they schedule when they're going to go out. A good time to put your posts onto Facebook, for instance, if you were going to do 3 a week, one is to put that, I'll put it on at about 8:15 in the morning. So perhaps have one post a week that's at about 8:15 in the morning. That tends to be the time that parents are accessing their phone. They might be about to start work or having just dropped the kids off at school. And then secondly, it's great to be able to post at a time when they're going to access their phone in the evening. So putting a post on at about perhaps 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the evening once a week too isn't a bad idea either, because that tends to be when back to their phone or their iPad and they're sitting comfortably on the couch with a glass of wine. So about 3 to 4 times a week, and think about the time of day that you're going to post also. There's only 2 don'ts when it comes to building a Facebook page. Number 1 is don't repeat yourself. So don't use Buffer to post things multiple times. People do feel like they're being badgered. And second, that one, it leads straight into that, which is don't badger them, which means that your Facebook page is not the page where we need to be telling all our parent community off for driving dangerously in the kiss and go area, nor is it the venue to be letting everybody know that for the 5th time this year, 3,4G has head lice rampant through it. We do not want to be making people feel negative affect and negative emotion by experiencing something that should be an incredibly positive classroom experience, incredibly positive school communications device. Clay, I'm just noticing your question here, and I'm noticing a fair bit of detail there, Clay. So what I'm going to do is, because I think we've got a specific instance there, and I'm going to make a note of that question. I'll get Chris to do that as well, and I'm going to send you a direct email after this presentation today to make sure that we answer your question a little more directly. And then the strategy number 5 that I want you to deploy is, I want you to, in communicating with your parents, I want you to make it really easy and safe for them to get involved. I'll unpack this through one story. I had a school that I was working with when I was an assistant principal and the principal, and they asked me to come over and help them with their school because they were really struggling to get parents involved. And they told me in particular that they were really struggling to get dads involved. And so we talked through what they had done, and they'd run a parent night, and none of the dads came. They then ran a parent night that was geared towards dads, and still none of them came. They then ran a barbecue at the school, hoping that the dads would come, and still none of the dads came. They wrote messages in the newsletter directed towards their dads, and still none of the dads got involved. So they were very frustrated that they were trying incredibly hard to reach this cohort, but what had happened was they weren't reaching them the way that they weren't getting the engagement or the involvement that they were looking for. So we talked about who their dads were, which gets to the first point here around making it safe and easy for people, is know who it is that you're speaking to. And this was a school in a really low socio-economic area with a lot of dads who hadn't finished school, a lot of dads who, for instance, didn't have a very positive view of school, and in fact they had this almost physical reaction to coming into the school. They immediately felt really uncomfortable, and so what we wanted to do, what we wanted to acknowledge there was the problem is not what we've got to say; it's that they feel really unsafe and really uncomfortable in that context. So what's the unique little creative step that we could take from there? They thought about that's who their dads are, and then they thought about that a little and realised that one of the things that was very clear in that community was that dads really liked barbecues, and so they were onto something with the barbecue idea, but also that nearly every family had a dog. So what they did, they had a dad and dog barbecue on a Saturday morning in a park just down the road from the school. They didn't have it at the school. They really didn't need it to be locally at the school. It was just a habit that was dictating they would run their events there. They really just wanted to pull them together with the people of the school. So what they did was run this barbecue down at the school down the road. It was a free barbecue. The staff came along in their thongs and their shorts and very casual about the whole thing as well. And what do you know, 63 dads and their dogs showed up to this barbecue. I certainly was pleased that I wasn't there with 63 dogs in the one place. But the parents said that the principal that I spoke to at that school told me that it was a roaring success and a really fabulous atmosphere, albeit a mightily chaotic one. But it became the start of their dads becoming more comfortable and safe in the school environment. This first step is to sometimes make them safe and comfortable with the people, and then after that we'll deal with the context. So what we do want to do is not to think about what's the message we want to get out there, but how can we make it easy for people to access that message. Okay, so look, I'm going to move into finishing up there. I want to remind people, I guess, that and I'm sorry for a slide that has a significant amount of text on there, but we've got a new partnership with the school in WA at Campbell West, and I got an email from the principal there, Denise Delphs, and I want to thank Denise for the kind words that she's had to say about her partnership with the school. And I guess what I wanted to bring to your attention, I'm not going to read this to you, by the way, what I wanted to bring to your attention was that this is the kind of work, this communication strategy, that sits deeply within all of our implementation plans with each of our Real Schools partners. It's only one component of it. We actually do a lot more comprehensive work to make sure that that message that we're getting out there and that the work that we're doing is very geared towards key purposes that both educators and parents have. So Denise's message is an incredibly positive one that of what the partnership has been like for her school and how it's kicking off and the difference that it's making at her school. And look, by attending today, one of the offers that I wanted to make available to you was to have a chat about whether that would be whether that might be an option for your school. We have many, many schools, almost 50 schools now around Australia, in 1-, 2- and 3-year partnerships. And if you think that your school might be interested in just a chat about that, it's a no obligation thing. Don't worry, you don't get shackled or invoiced for deciding that you want to that you'd like to have a chat. But if you want to have a conversation about your school and how we might be able to partner up, because there's always room for one more. If you'd like to do that, then what I want you to do is just use that question box. And if you would, just put the word partnership in there. And all we're going to do is just follow up by sending you an email, and let's see if we can make sure that we sit down to have a little chat and see whether that's something that might be a pathway for your school. So just put the word partnership in there, and we'll make that conversation happen post this webinar today. The other thing I want you to do is just feel free to have a bit of a look around the Real Schools website. I want you to know that that's available to you. Partnership isn't the only thing we do. We have our membership service, which is a really cheap and easy way to get monthly resources from us, as well as get access to a huge archive of resources to help you with this. We run coaching for school leaders, a coaching program for school leaders to help you focus on this and a little less on the peripherals. And we also have our Teach Fast program, which is about bringing teacher practice to life in a 12-month commitment to teachers in your school. So go and have a bit of a gawk around there as well and see if any of those can be of use to you. Now I'm gonna have a quick look at my question box again in just a moment. But what I do want to do is point out to you our next webinar. I'm really, really excited about this, and it's not because I'm not going to present the webinar. Look, it's a couple of guests coming along to present the next webinar. Sonia Karras and Sasha Kaluri are two of Australia's most sought-after professional youth motivational speakers. They've both been presenting all over Australia. They've been speaking to more than 200 groups of students and parents and teachers and organisations every year. They've also the directors of what is called now the Australian Teenage Expo, and that's Australia's largest youth education event, and they've been taking that to every state and territory this year. So what they're pointing out to us is that teenagers kind of have two lives once they reach that senior school level, and even those upper primary areas in some cases also. And they have a school life where they're making decisions about their future, and then they have this social life, which is about where they start to find the world of parties and clubs. And they're two very extreme worlds, and they require new skills and new understandings and a whole bunch of new information to make informed decisions. And the thing that's really interesting is that school is still the place where kids are learning the information that they need to make wise decisions while they access these risky environments. So teachers need to be really equipped with that, and Sasha and Sonia are going to come along to our next webinar on Thursday the 8th of September, and they're going to make sure that you have the skills and that you have an insight into that dual world that our young people have. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. I think that's a webinar that many schools can't afford to miss, and I also know that from speaking to Sonia and Sasha that that you'd be absolutely crazy to miss it, because they're going to deliver an important but also a very entertaining message for you as well. Okay. Now, while this might be the last slide, I'm noticing that there are a couple of questions, so let's just use the last couple of minutes to address those. A question from Nasibi. Please suggest some ways to deal with angry parents that verbally abuse you, like swearing, shouting, etc., etc. Is it okay to just assume that the neo-cortex is out of order? First of all, know that that's what's going on. The neo-cortex is out of order. And at that point, you have absolutely no obligation to try and engage in a conversation that allows them to rant. So what we need to do at that point is, first of all, get out of there. You need to be allowed to keep yourself personally and professionally safe. Walk away and let that person know that there are rules under which we engage, and when we have swearing, shouting and verbal abuse, they break the rules. We're not engaging anymore at that point, but the door is always open if you would like to engage in accordance with our rules, which means come and sit down, come and have a coffee, let's have a chat about it, let's see if we can put all that emotion aside, and let's see if we can do something collaboratively together. But first advice about that is that we will not tolerate our teachers being spoken to like that. Walk away, have nothing to do with it. Don't try to bring them back to the good side. Gab will be in touch with you. Thank you so much. Dohan, looking to continue partnership. What an exciting thing to start to talk about. We'll get around to that. Okay, and Clay, I'm going to follow up with you specifically afterwards as well. Look, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming along and being a part of this webinar this afternoon. If there is anything that we can do to support you with, even with the questions that you've raised today, by all means use the email address info@realschools.com.au that you can see on the screen now. Give us a call on that phone number, or just go and have a really good look around that website. Have a wonderful week, people. Keep doing your really important work, and keep bringing those parents back into partnership. Hey, all right. Bye for now.